It was meant to be an epic battle of champions, but instead it became an unforgettable lesson. Hype alone doesn't make a hero. On paper, this was one of the most hyped-up high school matchups in recent years, fueled by social media frenzy and the absurd pressure we all love to put on teenage athletes. This is the night LaMelo destroyed Julian Newman. LaMelo was fresh off his stint in Lithuania, where he was playing professional ball against grown men, getting tossed around a bit but leveling up along the way. He came back to wrap up his high school journey with Spire Academy, and, well, the dude was ready to make his presence known. Julian Newman, on the other hand, was still at Downey Christian, under the coaching of his ever-enthusiastic dad, Jamie, who had a tendency to hype his son to levels no one else quite bought into. Jamie wasn't just there for moral support. He was there to claim the basketball world by storm. He promised that if Downey pulled off the upset, no one would be talking about LeBron or Harden anymore, especially since this was 2019 when LeBron was still doing LeBron things and Harden was casually dropping 50 points on unsuspecting defenders. But sure, Jamie, let's go with that. The game was finally set and the internet couldn't wait to see this matchup. And to be fair, there were even some people who thought it was going to be competitive. Probably the same people who think buying lottery tickets is a retirement plan. Because comparing LaMelo, a 6'7" future NBA star, to Julian, a 5'7" kid with some flashy handles, was always a bit ambitious, to say the least. The gym was packed, the lights were bright, and the buzz was real. Fans, scouts, and media were all there, eager to witness the so-called Game of the Year. The only problem? No one told Spire Academy that they were supposed to make it a contest. From the jump, LaMelo was in complete control, orchestrating the game like he was conducting a symphony. He was dropping dimes left and right, effortlessly pulling up from deep, and making it all look way too easy. Spire was simply too big, too fast, and too skilled. Julian's usual flashy dribbling couldn't do much against Spire's length and athleticism. Every move he tried was met with resistance. Every flashy dribble got swallowed up by a sea of long arms. It was like watching someone try to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. As the game progressed, the gap between the two teams became embarrassingly wide. By halftime, Spire was already treating the whole thing like an exhibition. Double alley-oops, self-lobs, you name it. It wasn't just a beatdown, it was a show. A show that had Julian and Downey Christian on the wrong end of the highlight reel. By the end, it wasn't even a competition anymore. It was like watching a varsity squad go up against the JV team. If the JV team was having a really bad day, the stats were just as brutal as the eye test. Spire shot over 50% from the field, out-rebounded Downey by double digits, and had nearly 20 times the assists. Meanwhile, Julian, he finished with 15 points, which doesn't sound terrible until you realize he shot 6 for 25 from the field. Less than 25% shooting. It was one of those nights where the rim must have looked like a thimble. It wasn't just Julian, though. The whole Downey squad looked out of their league. They couldn't hold on to the ball, couldn't keep up with Spire's pace, and definitely couldn't stop LaMelo, who seemed to be toying with them at times. On offense, Spire basically scored at will, and on defense, they were forcing turnovers just by breathing on their opponents. It was ugly. Half the time, Spire didn't even look like they were trying, and they were still turning Downey over with a lazy press. LaMelo ended the game with a triple-double, 14 points, 12 assists, 10 rebounds, and a casual 5 steals. Julian, meanwhile, looked like he was in over his head. Sure, he had his moments, but they were fleeting, and the few times he did get a bucket, it felt more like a consolation prize than anything meaningful. Downey was simply outclassed, and Julian was, well, humbled. But the real kicker of the night? It wasn't even something that happened during the game. After getting blown out by 37 points, Julian's sister, Jaden, still wanted a picture with LaMelo. And when she asked him to follow her back on Instagram, he hit her with that now legendary response, "I don't run it." Cold. But hey, that's what happens when you're on the losing end of a blowout and still trying to chase. And that's kind of what this whole thing was about, wasn't it? The Newmans always seemed more interested in the clicks, the hype, and the reality show than in actual competitive basketball. Julian had the handles, sure, but it was always about the social media presence, the viral videos, and the buzz. Meanwhile, LaMelo was on a completely different path. A path that led him to the NBA, where he's now the face of the Charlotte Hornets and living out the dream. In the end, the night LaMelo destroyed Julian wasn't just a basketball game. It was a reality check, a reminder that social media hype can only take you so far, and that eventually you have to prove it on the court. LaMelo proved it. Julian? Not so much. But hey, at least we got some entertaining moments out of it, right? And there you have it. The story of how LaMelo Ball destroyed Julian Newman. It was supposed to be a clash of the titans, but it ended up being more of a clinic. A game filled with drama, excitement, and a whole lot of humbling. While their paths have diverged completely since then, this matchup is one we'll all remember. Not because it was competitive, but because it showed us who was real and who was just a product of the hype. The hype leading up to the game was truly something else. Both Julian and LaMelo had been building their own respective fan bases for years. LaMelo had been in the public eye since he was just a kid, with his older brother Lonzo and his father LeVar making waves in the basketball world. LaMelo's journey was well documented, from the undefeated Chino Hills team to playing professionally in Lithuania at just 16. He had a global following and was seen as the next big thing, with legitimate talent to back it up. Julian, on the other hand, was known for his viral videos. His flashy dribbling drills and YouTube highlights turned him into a sensation, but the substance behind those highlights was often questioned by many. Still, Julian had a loyal following, and the Newman family leaned into the fame, capitalizing on every opportunity to promote Julian as the next big thing. The hype was palpable as the matchup approached. Julian's father, Jamie, was his biggest promoter, always pushing the narrative that Julian was just as good as, if not better than, the players with real NBA potential. Jamie Newman was a character all on his own, a mix of showman and overzealous dad, constantly pushing Julian into the spotlight. He claimed that this was going to be the game that proved everyone wrong. The doubters, the haters, the ones who thought Julian wasn't on LaMelo's level. Jamie wasn't just hyping Julian, he was hyping the whole Newman brand. They had their own reality show, a steady stream of content on social media, and they used every ounce of attention to push their narrative. When game day finally came, the gym was overflowing with people. Fans were packed shoulder to shoulder, eager to catch a glimpse of these two internet sensations facing off. The media presence was heavy, cameras flashing, video crews capturing every second, and scouts lined the court, some actually there to evaluate LaMelo's progress, others simply caught up in the spectacle of it all. The buzz was undeniable, but so was the sense that this was about to be more one-sided than the Newmans wanted to admit. The Spire Academy players were taller, more athletic, and had a level of chemistry that Downey Christian couldn't match. It was clear from the warm-ups alone, the Spire players looked loose, confident, and ready to dominate. From the opening tip-off, it was apparent that this game was not going to live up to the hype, at least not in the way the Newmans had envisioned. LaMelo took control immediately, showing his poise and maturity on the court. He was effortlessly setting up his teammates, throwing flashy no-look passes that landed perfectly in stride, and casually pulling up from way beyond the arc, hitting deep three-pointers that had the crowd on their feet. LaMelo's confidence wasn't just swagger, it was backed up by his play. He controlled the pace of the game, dictating every possession, making it look like a practice drill. There was no rush, no panic, just a player completely in his element. Julian, on the other hand, looked overwhelmed. He was trying to break down defenders with his trademark crossovers, but nothing was working. Spire's length and athleticism were just too much for him. Every time he tried to make a move, there was another defender in his face, another set of hands reaching for the ball. It didn't help that Julian seemed to be forcing the issue, trying to do too much on his own, as if he could single-handedly will his team back into the game. He missed shot after shot, and his frustration was evident. The flashy handles that looked so good on Instagram weren't translating into real success against a disciplined, talented defense. Spire, meanwhile, was putting on an absolute clinic. They were faster, stronger, and just better in every aspect of the game. They moved the ball beautifully, finding the open man time and time again, and finishing plays with authority. Their fast breaks were electric, with LaMelo orchestrating everything. He was throwing outlet passes that traveled the length of the court, hitting his teammates in stride for easy dunks. It was a highlight reel from start to finish, and Spire was having fun with it. The crowd loved every second of it, cheering wildly as Spire continued to pour it on. It wasn't just LaMelo. Every player on Spire seemed to be getting in on the action, feeding off the energy in the gym. By the second half, it was clear that the game was over. Spire was up big, and they were showing no signs of slowing down. They were out there throwing alley-oops to themselves, executing ridiculous plays that would have been considered disrespectful if the game had been close. But it wasn't close. It was a blowout in every sense of the word. The Spire players were smiling, laughing, and celebrating every big play, while the Downey Christian players looked dejected, completely out of answers. Julian was still trying, but it was almost painful to watch. He kept putting up shots, kept trying to make something happen, but nothing was falling. The frustration was written all over his face, and you could see the disappointment in his eyes. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read 180 in favor of Spire Academy. A 37-point blowout that, if anything, understated just how dominant Spire had been. The numbers told the story. Spire shot over 50% from the field, dominated the boards, and dished out assist after assist. LaMelo ended with a triple-double, his performance as effortless as it was impressive. Julian had 15 points, but it took him 25 shots to get there. It was a humbling experience, one that would stick with him for a long time. But the drama didn't end with the final buzzer. The moment that everyone ended up talking about wasn't a dunk or a deep three. It was Julian Newman, Julian's sister, approaching LaMelo after the game. She asked if he could follow her back on Instagram, and without missing a beat, LaMelo hit her with that infamous response, "I don't run it." It was the kind of moment that summed up the entire night. Spire was on a different level, and the Newmans were still trying to turn everything into a moment for the cameras, even in defeat. The Newmans had always been about the show. They had their reality series, their viral videos, and their flashy social media presence. But that night was a reminder that, at the end of the day, it's about what happens on the court. Julian had the hype, but LaMelo had the game. LaMelo was on a path that would take him to the NBA, where he'd become a franchise player, an all-star, and a cornerstone for the Charlotte Hornets. Julian, meanwhile, would continue his journey, but it was clear that the gap between them was more than just height and talent. It was about substance versus spectacle. The night LaMelo destroyed Julian Newman will be remembered not just for the lopsided score, but for what it represented. It was a turning point, a reality check for those who believed that social media fame could replace real skill and dedication. It was entertaining, sure, but it was also a reminder of the difference between those who are serious about the game and those who are serious about the attention. LaMelo Ball was the real deal, and that night he proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. In the aftermath, social media was buzzing. The memes, the highlights, the clips of LaMelo's cold response to Jaden, it all went viral. People couldn't get enough of it. It was the kind of moment that defined an era of high school basketball, where social media presence and actual talent collided in such a dramatic fashion. For LaMelo, it was just another step on his journey, a journey that would take him to the highest levels of the sport. For Julian, it was a reminder of just how far he still had to go. The contrast between the two players couldn't have been more insane. LaMelo was polished, confident, and in control. He had the experience of playing overseas, of facing grown men, of understanding the game at a higher level. Julian had the handles, the flair, but when faced with real competition, he struggled. It wasn't just about the physical difference, it was about the mindset, the approach, the understanding of how to play the game at a high level. LaMelo had all of that and more. Julian was still trying to figure it out. Even after the game, the Newmans kept pushing the narrative. Jamie was still out there talking up Julian, promoting the next big thing, trying to keep the hype alive. But it was hard to ignore what had just happened on the court. The reality was undeniable. LaMelo was on a different level, and no amount of hype could change that. The game had been a statement, a declaration that LaMelo Ball was the real deal, and that no amount of flashy dribbling or viral videos could take that away from him. It's almost funny to think that there was ever a debate about who was better. LaMelo went on to be the third overall pick in the NBA draft, winning Rookie of the Year and becoming one of the brightest young stars in the league. Julian continued his journey, but the path to the NBA seemed further away than ever. The night they faced off was supposed to be a clash of equals, but it ended up being a reminder of just how wide the gap really was. And yet, for all the talk, all the hype, all the drama, the night LaMelo destroyed Julian was undeniably entertaining. It was a spectacle, a moment in time that captured the attention of the basketball world, if only for a little while. It was a reminder that the game is played on the court, not on Instagram, and that real talent will always shine through in the end. LaMelo Ball proved that, and Julian Newman, for all his effort, was left to pick up the pieces. LaMelo Ball destroyed Julian Newman, not out of spite or malice, but simply by being better. And that, more than anything, is what made the night so unforgettable. Do social media stars deserve the same hype as true athletic talent? Drop a like and subscribe for more.